So here's the big question we're tackling today. Is artificial intelligence going to be our climate savior? Or is it actually maybe an energy villain hiding in plain sight? That's what we're diving into, looking at this really complex relationship between AI and climate change. And we've gathered quite a mix of perspectives for you. We're looking at major players like The Economist, Scientific American, reports cited in Inside Climate News, Bloomberg too, but also some critical voices, like for the Climate Discussion Nexus. So our mission really is to unpack all of this for you, help you sort through the hype, the warnings, everything.
Exactly. The aim isn't to pick a winner, good AI or bad AI. It's about synthesizing what all these different sources are saying. We want to map out the optimistic ideas, but also the real challenges, the hidden costs maybe, so you get a properly rounded view of what's going on.
Okay, so let's start with the positive case then, because it's easy to focus on the worries, but there's a lot of optimism out there about how AI could actually help with climate solutions. Where does that come from?
Well, there are some pretty specific and honestly quite compelling applications being discussed. Things like using AI to spot methane leaks right from space. Methane's a big deal, greenhouse gas-wise, so that's significant. And then there's breeding crops that can withstand more heat, crucial for food security as the climate changes. Even designing totally new materials specifically made to capture carbon dioxide straight out of the air.
That carbon capture idea is pretty powerful. And there's this great real-world example, isn't there, from Bloomberg, the beehives hives.
Oh, right, the bees.
Yeah. These aren't your standard beehives. We're talking about, around 300,000 of these high-tech units already out there in the U.S., in almond fields, canola, pistachios. And inside, they've got scanners, robotic arms, all run by AI. It's constantly checking on the bees, quality health, and it can even give them medicine if needed. It's actively fighting those big die-offs we hear about.
It's a fantastic example of AI in action, tackling a real environmental stressor. And if you zoom out, look at the bigger picture, you've got the Grantham Institute. Their study, reported in Scientific American, it projects AI could potentially cut global climate pollution by, get this, up to 5.4 billion metric tons a year over the next decade.
Wow, 5.4 billion tons.
Yeah, and here's the really interesting part. They theorize that this massive reduction could actually outweigh the extra energy AI itself uses, running all those data centers. So it's not just AI cleaning up its own mess. It's this idea it could deliver a net positive climate impact, a really significant one.
Okay, so how?
Yeah.
How could AI achieve cuts on that scale? What's the mechanism? The Grantham study points to a few things. Integrating renewables better. AI could get much better at forecasting, like when the sun will shine or the wind will blow, and matching that with demand.
Right, smoothing out the bumps.
Exactly. Helping the grid distribute that renewable energy more accurately. So you worry less about, the sun not shining, which in turn could boost solar and wind uptake. And maybe we need less of those polluting backup power plants.
Makes sense. And beyond the grid, there's other stuff too, like AI helping to identify new kinds of protein, ways to replace meat and dairy in our diets, basically. And since livestock farming is a huge source of emissions, finding good alternatives could make a real difference.
And it's not just climate, is it? There's that broader social good angle, improving healthcare, boosting creativity.
Yeah, Statista mentions that, but with a big but.
Right, the caveat. People need to learn to use it ethically and effectively, which sounds simple, but maybe isn't.
Okay, but let's pivot, because for all that potential, there's the energy cost, that other side of the coin. And some sources, like the Climate Discussion Nexus, they're really pushing back against that purely optimistic view.
Yeah, this is where the skepticism really kicks in. I mean, right now, data centers use about, 1.5% of global electricity?
Seems manageable? Maybe. On its own, perhaps. But the worry is the growth. If AI causes that demand to jump, say, 10 times, suddenly you're looking at 15% of global electricity. And as one analysis put it, that's not very reassuring viewed in context. It highlights the sheer scale we could be dealing with.
And the growth numbers are pretty stark. Inside Climate News had this stat. Early 2025, the U.S. has over 5,000 data centers.
5,000.
Yeah, compared to only about 1,000 just 5 years before that. That's explosive.
Yeah.
And that kind of growth just eats up resources, especially electricity.
And looking ahead, the International Energy Agency projects that by 2030, which isn't far off, data centers globally will consume twice as much electricity as they do now. That's putting huge pressure on grids, especially here in the U.S., where demand's already climbing for other reasons.
And here's a contradiction, or maybe just a reality check that jumped out from the sources. Oil companies. They're using AI right now.
Oh, yeah. For what?
To find new places to drill for oil and gas.
Right. So AI isn't inherently green. It's a tool.
Exactly. And add to that, Bloomberg NEF predicts that over the next decade, most of the new power needed for these data centers, it's likely to come from fossil fuels.
Oof. That directly undercuts the climate-saving potential, doesn't it?
It really could, despite all those potential mitigation strategies like the ones the Grantham study mentioned. It shows how AI can be used for goals that run counter to climate efforts.
Right, which brings us back to that Grantham study's optimism. It really does come with, as one source called it, a pretty big if. It all hinges on channeling AI into those key impact areas and, crucially, on governments playing a vital role in steering it.
And you have to wonder how likely that coordinated global effort really is, right?
Exactly. Some sources definitely imply that's a very optimistic assumption about how things actually work.
And then there's this other angle, almost a micro-level cost. The hidden environmental cost of just using AI, like running a prompt.
Ah, yes, that came up via AccuWeather and CNN, I think. The idea that every query, every image generation has an energy footprint.
So what's the takeaway there? Stop using ChatGPT.
Well, the study author, Maximilian Donner, his suggestion was more about awareness. If users understood the environmental cost, maybe they'd think twice about, asking AI to generate a picture of them as an action figure just for fun, or telling it jokes when they're bored. Are those tasks really necessary, considering the energy?
Interesting. So it puts some responsibility back on us, the individual users.
Hmm?
Okay, so stepping back from just the energy use and the carbon numbers, our sources, and some really insightful listener comments, actually, they push us into broader territory, deeper questions about trust, ethics, how we actually live with this technology.
Yeah, that ethical dimension is huge. Remember that statista point. Most people don't know how to use AI ethically and effectively. If that's true, what does it really mean for AI's potential to save the world? Are we equipped to handle it responsibly? One source even asked, kind of pointedly, if humans even know how to use a stone axe ethically, let alone AI. It does make you stop and think about our track record with powerful tools.
Wow, that's a sharp point. And speaking of deep questions, there was this fascinating comment from a user. They talked about a discussion they had with an AI, Claude 4.
Oh yeah, about what?
About research by Nikolov and Zeller. It suggests that the warming we've seen this century correlates really strongly with reduced cloud albedo, basically, clouds reflecting less sunlight.
Okay, so more heat gets through.
Right. And the user said they pushed the AI to analyze this from first principles, fundamental logic, not just repeating standard climate models. And Claude 4 apparently concluded this cloud albedo hypothesis was, and I'm quoting here, much more simple, explainable, and provable than the standard greenhouse gas theory.
Whoa, that's quite something. An AI challenging dominant scientific consensus based on a different line of evidence.
Exactly. It's a mind-bending example of AI engaging with complex science in unexpected ways.
And it throws up huge questions, doesn't it? Like the ones raised in the comments. If you have two AIs disagreeing or an AI disagreeing with human experts, who do you trust? How do you decide? And what happens if governments start using AI behind the scenes for major decisions affecting citizens without transparency? What does that do to democracy, the public trust?
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've definitely seen AI cast in two very different lights. This incredibly powerful tool for climate good.
And this potentially massive energy drain, raising all sorts of difficult questions.
Right. It's quite the paradox.
And what really stands out, I think, is that it's not just about the tech itself. It's about us, our choices, our responsibility, and how we actually develop and deploy it. Which leads to that core question. Can we be disciplined enough, focused enough to really harness AI's benefits while managing its downsides? Or will our usual habits, in nature, lead to it just amplifying the problems, including its own environmental cost?
That really is the crux of it. And maybe here's a final thought for you listening to take away. As AI weaves itself more and more into our daily lives, from tackling huge scientific challenges right down to helping us write an email or plan a trip, how will your individual choices about using it add up? What impact will our collective interactions have on AI's overall footprint on the planet? Something to definitely mull over next time you type a prompt into that little box.